Welcome to Chapter by Chapter Stories. Today we are going to be reading the Hollow Creek Files, Book 1, Chapter 1, The Door Beneath the Sycamore. So settle in, the story's about to begin. Rowan Hale had always thought Hollow Creek sounded like a place someone made up. A name like that belonged in an old paperback, printed in faded ink, the kind you found in the back of a closet, and read with a flashlight after everyone else had gone to sleep. But Hollow Creek was real. It was his home. It was the town where people waved like they meant it, where the diner served cinnamon toast on Tuesdays, and where the creek cut a slow, familiar line through everything: yards, woods, memories. In Hollow Creek, things didn't change much. That was the problem. Rowan was the kind of person who noticed small changes, like they were loud noises. A mailbox repainted, a new dent in a street sign, a different bird call in the morning. He noticed because his brain didn't let things slide by easily. It held on to details, turned them over like stones, and waited to see what lived underneath. Today, right now, the creek wasn't making sense. He stood at the edge of it, with the late afternoon sun warming his shoulders and the cool smell of water rising from the rocks. January air in Hollow Creek wasn't the biting kind. It was damp and watchful. It clung to your jacket and made your breath look like secrets. Rowan held the map open with both hands. The paper was old enough that it didn't just fold, it remembered its folds. The corners were soft, rounded from being opened 1,000 times. The ink had faded to the color of weak tea, and the smell? It smelled like cedar and dust, like the bottom drawer of his grandfather's desk. Rowan's grandfather had called it a good map. Not accurate, not official, good. The kind of good that meant it told the truth even when people didn't want it to. Rowan traced the creek line on the page. It was drawn in a thin, wavering stroke, like someone had tried to copy moving water. The line curved left beyond the old sycamore tree, but the real creek didn't turn left. It stopped. Rowan lowered the map and stared. The water didn't pool. It didn't slow. It didn't spread out wide, like it should if it had hit a shallow spot. It disappeared, quietly, smoothly, as if the earth had opened a mouth and the creek decided to pour itself in. Rowan swallowed. Okay, he muttered to himself. That's new. He said it like he was joking, but his fingers tightened on the paper, because the creek didn't do that. Not here, not ever. Hollow Creek had floods. It had droughts. Sometimes the water got high and muddy after storms and left bits of driftwood tangled in bushes. Sometimes it ran low enough you could walk across in boots without getting your ankles wet. But it didn't vanish into the ground like a trick. Rowan stepped closer, the soles of his sneakers sinking into damp leaves. The sound of the creek should have been louder here, water dropping over stones, sliding over roots. But the closer he got, the quieter it seemed, like the creek was holding its breath. The sycamore tree stood at the bend of the path, enormous and old and pale-barked, its trunk wide enough that 3 kids could barely wrap arms around it. The roots clawed into the bank like giant knuckles. Rowan had climbed it as a kid until his mom caught him and made him swear he'd stop. He'd carved his initials into a low root once, and then felt guilty and never did it again. The sycamore felt like a landmark, more than a tree. Everyone in town knew it. Everyone in town avoided talking about it. That was another thing Rowan noticed. The way adults sometimes went quiet near certain places, like the air had rules. Rowan paused at the water's edge. The creek here flowed into a shallow pocket shadowed by the trees. The water swirled once, twice, and then slipped down into a dark gap between the stones that didn't look natural at all. He crouched, heart beating faster, and that's when he saw it. Not the gap, the stone. At first he thought it was just another rock, flat and pale beneath the root tangle, but it was too smooth, too level, like someone had placed it there on purpose and then tried to hide it. Rowan brushed away wet leaves with the back of his hand. The stone was the size of a small door, which was ridiculous because why would a door be under a tree? He leaned closer, feeling the fine mist of creek water on his cheeks. There, cut into the stone, was a symbol, 3 interlocking circles, carved shallow but clean, the grooves dark with damp. Rowan's throat went dry. He had seen those circles before, not in the woods, on paper. His grandfather's desk had held a thin folder labeled Surveys. Rowan wasn't supposed to open it, but he had once. Carefully, because curiosity was not a habit Rowan had ever been able to quit. Inside were copies of old maps, some official, some hand-drawn. A few had strange markings that didn't match any modern street. And one had this symbol, 3 interlocking circles, drawn in the margin like a note someone didn't want to write out loud. Rowan's skin prickled. He pressed his palm to the stone. Cold, slick, real. "Okay," he whispered again, not joking this time. "What are you?" The creek gurgled softly. Rowan pushed, just a little, expecting nothing. The stone shifted. A tiny scrape, like a breath exhaled through teeth. Rowan jerked his hand back as if the stone had bitten him. The symbol moved with it. The whole slab, this door-sized slab, shifted under the sycamore's roots. Rowan's mind tried to fit the shape of that fact into a normal explanation. It did not succeed. His heart hammered hard enough that he could feel it in his ears. He leaned forward again, hands hovering now, not touching. The stone had a seam, a thin, almost invisible line along the edge where it met the earth. Rowan's pulse stuttered. He looked around quickly, the way you look when you suddenly realize you might be doing something you're not supposed to. The woods were empty. No hikers, no dog walkers, no bikes rattling down the path. Just the trees, the creek, and the sycamore looming above him like it always had and always would. Rowan swallowed. Then he did the thing he always did when he found something impossible. He needed Maeve and Eli. Because if he saw it alone, it might become one of those memories his brain couldn't trust, the kind that left you wondering if you had dreamed it. But if they saw it too, then it was real. Rowan grabbed his phone with damp fingers and hit Maeve's name before he could overthink it. Maeve picked up on the 3rd ring. "What?" she said, flat and immediate, like she'd been expecting trouble. She didn't say hello when she answered the phone. Maeve treated every call like a suspicious knock at the door. Rowan huffed out of breath. "You have to come to the sycamore." There was a pause. Then, "Why?" "Because the creek is wrong." Another pause, longer. "That is the least convincing sentence you've ever said." "I'm serious." "Rowan," Maeve said, and he could hear her sitting up. Her voice had that alert edge now. "If this is another weird rock situation, I swear I'm going to—" "It moved," Rowan blurted. "The stone moved." Silence. Maeve did not like mystery. She liked answers. She liked proof. But she also liked being right. And she especially liked proving Rowan wrong when he got dramatic. Which meant she would come. "I'm on my way," she said and hung up. Rowan called Eli next. Eli answered too quickly, like he'd been staring at the screen waiting for it to ring. "Rowan," Eli asked, "did you find something?" Rowan didn't ask how Eli knew. Eli always knew. He could smell secrets like rain. "Come to the sycamore," Rowan said, "and bring your flashlight." "Oh," Eli breathed, like that was the best invitation he'd ever received. Okay, I'm coming." Rowan ended the call and looked back at the stone. It was still there, slightly shifted, still impossible, and the creek continued to pour itself into the dark gap as if it had been doing it forever. Rowan waited, trying to calm his breathing. He forced himself to notice ordinary things. A leaf caught in a small whirlpool, the sound of a branch creaking above, the way his hands trembled slightly when he folded the map and tucked it into his backpack. But the ordinary things didn't hold, because the air around the sycamore felt different, quieter, like the woods had leaned in. He stood, stepped back from the creek, and scanned the tree line. That's when he saw the owl. It perched on a lower branch of the sycamore, blending into a shadow, except for its pale face, which looked like a small moon caught in bark and leaves. Rowan froze. Owls weren't unusual out here, but this one felt placed, like a punctuation mark. The owl stared at him, not blinking. Rowan's mouth went dry. "Hi," he said softly, because he didn't know what else to say to a creature that looked like it understood more than it should. The owl tilted its head. Rowan forced himself to look away, because looking too long at something like that made you feel like you were the one being studied. A twig snapped behind him. Rowan spun. Maeve came into view on the path, boots crunching leaves, jacket zipped up, hair pulled back, like she'd decided the day was not going to get the better of her. She stopped when she saw Rowan's expression. "Okay," she said slowly. "Now I'm interested." Rowan pointed without speaking. Maeve stepped closer, her gaze following his finger to the creek's vanishing point. Her eyebrows pulled together. "That's," she began, then stopped, like her brain had hit the same wall his had. Rowan opened his mouth, but Eli's voice came from behind him. "Guys!" They turned. Eli stood on the path, backpack slung over one shoulder, a flashlight clutched in one hand and a notebook in the other. His cheeks were flushed from running. His eyes were bright, the way they got when he'd been reading something old and exciting. "You're not going to believe what I just found in the historical records," Eli said, almost breathless. Maeve didn't even look at him. "Eli, there's a creek disappearing into the ground." Eli's gaze snapped to the water. His expression changed from excitement to stunned stillness. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a lot." Rowan exhaled. "Come here." They moved together toward the sycamore roots. Rowan crouched and brushed away the leaves again, revealing the three interlocking circles. Maeve leaned in, squinting. "Is that carved?" "Yes," Rowan said, "and I touched it, and it moved." Maeve gave him a look. "You touched a mysterious carved stone door, and you didn't think to wait for the rest of us first?" Rowan shrugged helplessly. "I didn't know it was a door until it moved." Eli crouched, his flashlight beam cutting across the symbol. "That mark," he said softly. "I've seen it." Maeve glanced at him. "Where?" Eli flipped open his notebook to a page filled with messy handwriting and small sketches. "In the archives, on an early survey, on a property boundary note from..." He paused, eyes narrowing as he searched his memory. "From before Hollow Creek was Hollow Creek," he finished quietly. Rowan felt a chill slide under his jacket. "Before it was called that?" Eli nodded. "It had another name, sort of. More like a description." May frowned. "What description?" Eli swallowed, then said it like he was afraid of how it sounded. "Arkstone?" Rowan and Maeve both looked at him. Eli lifted his eyes. "Arkstone Mill? That wasn't just a mill. It was a boundary marker, a control point. The earliest maps show the creek drawn differently, straighter, like it was kept in place." Maeve stared. "That's ridiculous." Eli's voice went softer. "I know." Rowan's attention snapped back to the stone. If Eli was right, if this symbol connected to the oldest version of the town, then whatever this door was, it wasn't new. It was newly revealed. Rowan reached out again, slower this time. Maeve grabbed his wrist. "No." Rowan looked at her. "We need to see if it moves again." Maeve's jaw tightened. "We need to not become the kind of kids people talk about in town for the next 50 years. Eli's eyes flicked between them. "If it's real, someone else might find it." Rowan held Maeve's gaze. "It already moved. That means it's not sealed. Not fully." Maeve hesitated. Rowan could see the argument happening behind her eyes. Practical caution versus stubborn curiosity. Maeve released his wrist. "Fine," she said. "But if something grabs you, I'm telling everyone you did it on purpose." Rowan nodded once. He pressed his palm to the stone again. At first, nothing happened. Then, very slowly, he felt it. A shift beneath his hand. A pressure change in the air, like the world was making room for something. The stone moved. Not a tiny scrape this time. A deliberate slide. The seam widened. The cold air breathed out of the earth, damp and metallic. Maeve's breath caught. Eli's flashlight beam trembled. Rowan's heart pounded, and the stone lifted and slid aside, grinding softly against the roots and earth. And beneath it, darkness. A narrow stairwell cut down into the ground, its steps carved from stone, disappearing into a black that didn't look like normal shadow. It looked thick, waiting. The creak sound changed instantly, as if it had been muted and someone had turned it back on. Water rushed louder now, flowing toward the opening like it knew exactly where it was going. Maeve stepped back. That wasn't there. Rowan's voice came out then. No. Eli leaned forward, eyes wide. That's a constructed staircase. Which means, Maeve said, voice tight, that someone built it. Rowan stared into the dark. The stairs were slick with moisture. The air that rose from below smelled old, stone and wet earth, and something like rust. The kind of smell you found in basements that hadn't been opened in years. Or ever. Rowan's flashlight sat in his backpack, but he didn't reach for it yet. Something about shining light down there felt like announcing themselves, like knocking, like permission. Eli whispered, "This is exactly like the tunnel references." Maeve snapped her gaze to him. "What tunnel references?" Eli looked guilty. "I didn't want to sound crazy before I had proof." Rowan didn't even blame him. Everyone in town had learned early that sounding crazy was dangerous. People remembered. Eli flipped to another notebook page and held it up, though his hands shook slightly. There are notes in the oldest records, not public ones, like side notes, mentions of sealed passages and water control chambers. Most were dismissed as rumors. Maeve stared at the writing, then at the stairs, and then at Rowan. "Rowan," she said slowly, "tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking." Rowan swallowed. He was thinking it. He hated that he was thinking it, but the thought was already there, firm and clear, like a stone in his pocket. If there were answers in Hollow Creek, real answers, then they might be down those stairs. Rowan shifted his weight, one foot inching closer to the edge. Maeve grabbed his sleeve, not hard, just enough to anchor him. "No," she said, "we do not go into random underground staircases." Rowan didn't argue, because the truth was he didn't know if he could move. Something about the darkness below felt occupied, not by a creature, not by a person, by attention. Rowan could feel it, like the moment before a storm when the air goes heavy and the world waits. Eli spoke softly, almost to himself. "The creek disappearing, the door opening, it's like—" "Like what?" Maeve demanded. Eli's throat bobbed. "Like it's been waiting for someone to notice." Rowan's mouth went dry. The owl above them made a low sound, soft, not a hoot, more like a breath. Maeve's eyes flicked upward, then back to the darkness, her voice lowered. "Someone else is going to see this," she whispered. "A hiker, a kid, someone from town?" Rowan looked at the stairs again. The doorway was open. The creek flowed toward it, and the air coming from below felt colder by the second, as if the earth itself was exhaling. Rowan whispered, "Or someone from town already knows." Maeve went still. Eli didn't move. They all stared at the opening as if expecting it to close again, to vanish, to pretend it never existed. It didn't. Then faintly, Rowan heard something that made his blood turn to ice. A sound from below, not dripping water, not shifting stone. A whisper, so soft he couldn't tell if it was real. Maeve's eyes widened. "Did you—" "Yes," Rowan breathed. Eli leaned closer, face pale. That sounded like—" Rowan backed away from the opening, heart racing. The whisper came again, clearer this time. Not a word, not yet. But voices, multiple, overlapping, as if a crowd was speaking behind a wall. Maeve's grip tightened on Rowan's sleeve. Rowan stared into the darkness, and for the first time since he'd found the door, he wanted to run. But his feet stayed rooted, because the voices didn't sound angry. They sounded afraid. And somehow, Rowan knew the most terrifying part wasn't that the staircase existed. It was that it had opened. As if something underneath Hollow Creek had decided, now is the time. Rowan's flashlight was suddenly in his hand. He didn't remember grabbing it. His fingers were numb around the grip. Maeve whispered, "We should go." Eli whispered back, "We should listen." And Rowan stared into the dark. The creek rushed louder. The owl above them watched, and the stairwell waited. End of Chapter 1. If you enjoyed Chapter 1, please come back next week to hear The Hollow Creek Files, Book 1, Chapter 2, The Staircase That Shouldn't Exist.